Just pull up
Come and sit. We're rambling together. This is a powwow.
Come join.
This is a fun little powwow.
It's a fun little powwow.
Joel, do you want to come powwow with us?
There's a whole chair. Right now, I usually focus on fantasy, but right now I'm running a sci-fi. It's on Mars because that is very cool. I decided things to, and the barrenness of the climate kind of suited the barrenness emotionally of the early stages of the story. It's like if your environment can suit the narrative or like contribute to the narrative, thematically speaking. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the principle of. It kind of starts in screenwriting, but it kind of carry over to novel writing that every element of your narrative should probably contribute to the narrative in some way. Like, if it's not, like, contributing actively to the narrative, it's probably unnecessary. So I chose an environment that seemed to suit the character of the narrative, with that being a big desert planet in the space with not a lot of sustaining life. It's about this guy who's angry and sad and taking it out on all his friends, and he needs to stop doing that, get back up with his friends and fix the problems instead of just being sad about them.
Prince Zuko. Like, this is just like a ramble, but like I'm kind of the opposite on the setting thing. I love a good juxtaposition.
Dude, irony and contrast are the bomb, though.
Yeah, like I love the contrast. Like specifically, I remember there was a time a little while ago where I would specifically put the quote-unquote wrong weather for a scene.
Oh, that's really
on
cool.
purpose to give it a different flavor. Like there was one of the happiest scenes in the whole novel, and it was in a thunderstorm on purpose.
It'll amplify, though.
It does.
It's like there's using the environment to amplify the theme by reflecting them, and then there's it by contrasting them.
Yeah.
And both of those are really cool and work in different ways, but that they're both like fun.
Yes.
I actually was laughing with this book because I've had so many people assume that Annika is like a reflection of me. They're like, oh, Annika must be you.
Oh,
and
that's
I'm
how
like,
you pronounce that.
No. Actually, I love winter, and I love winter storms, and I would probably be really happy being stuck in a cabin in the middle of nowhere for like 8 months. I would be like, yes!
Best month of my life.
Yes. Snowstorm, let's go.
Like I would be the guy from The Shining and go like live in the hotel on the mountaintop, but like I'm already insane, so nothing would happen to me.
Nothing would happen.
I would just write a lot.
I was that guy though. I got locked in my apartment for like a week and a half during a really big thunderstorm 2 years ago, and I was like, I was ready to just sit in the corner and cry. It's like, I'm stuck and I'm sad. It's cold outside.
Yes,
It's cold outside.
It's so cold.
it is though, because like during the lockdowns when like they wouldn't even let you go to stores and stuff. Like Maryland was ridiculous during that time, and like we were all stuck in the house. Like for the first like maybe 3 days, it was awesome.
Big sleep.
And then after that, it's like, oh, we are actually stuck here, and the idea of going to Target sounds really good right now. Yeah, like I distinctly remember I was craving Target.
You were craving Target.
I was.
Target atmosphere.
I was like, there was like a whole week where I was like talking to my mom nonstop about how bad I wanted to go to Target, and then like once we were allowed to, that was the first place we went.
Target.
Yes,
Target.
My beloved.
Target.
What genres do we have represented with the writers we have in the area, whether you finish something or not?
Yes.
I was just about to say that.
Yes.
Yes, we have those.
No, realistically though, like I'm mostly fantasy because I don't like to research things, and I would rather make up the things and then forget them later and have to research them anyway, but in a notebook.
I write primarily fantasy, but I have ideas for like some. They're not. It wouldn't be a detective novel, but more of a like a slow thriller. I also enjoy my romance when the characters call for it.
The characters call for it. What about you, Elijah?
I write primarily fantasy. On the high side, I'm very into magic systems, so I incorporate that into the world and the setting. I typically like to make my settings match the lore and create like cool ways in how the worlds function and work along with the magic system.
Rachel.
I'm in YA, mostly fantasy. It got a little bit of superheroes in there. I love doing retellings.
Oh, fun.
Ooh, so I've written several of those.
That's really cool.
So by all genres, you mean we have fantasy with a small sprinkling of something else?
Genre is a tool to tell your story better.
Yes, it is.
So I start with a character or a set of characters that I want to get to know better, and try to figure out what genre would suit their narrative. So I did toss up with Pandora, which is the working title for my current project. I thought about making the memory gimmick like a magical thing. But the other elements of the story I thought would suit science fiction better, so I kind of tossed around magic and fantasy for like 20 minutes, metaphorically speaking, but then I was like, no, this would be way cooler on Mars.
I mean, strictly speaking, as far as sci-fi plus magic goes, most sci-fi is just kind of like fudge, give or take. Very few of us can write The Martian, so most sci-fi, honestly, is like the really soft sci-fi, kind of leaning into the like made-up fantasy side. Just most of the authors don't acknowledge it.
So I read a really good commentary on sci-fi recently, which is I'm kind of drawing from while I'm writing, is that science fiction is not about the future. It's about the present. It's commentating on present ideas and technological things and notions through the metaphorical lens. So Orwell was writing in a time where he was becoming concerned about surveillance state and like emotional control, and thinking to himself, like trying to write a reflection of that to kind of commentate on it. And I don't know, Andy Weir is an exceptional author, and I think he was just really excited about going to space.
Even if one's not strictly trying to like tell a prophecy of the future by writing sci-fi, like it kind of is, because you are technically writing about the future. But the thing about that is everybody who's ever tried to predict the future can only go off the present.
Yeah.
So whether you're trying to write a prediction and it ends up being a commentary on your current status, or whether you're trying to write a commentary on your current status by writing about the future, they're kind of like hand in hand no matter what.
Yeah. And then you get things like, what's that silly internet post? We built the Torment Nexus from that classic science fiction novel. Don't build the Torment Nexus.
Again, back to Star Trek, but like, the whole flip phone thing from their little communicators, like it did kind of predict the future.
Do not unlock this rant in me. I could talk about
Yes, don't start.
Star Trek influencing culture for an hour.
It's unlocked.
Next panel.
There we go. Star Trek rant panel next.
Next panel's topic, we'll be discussing how science fiction influenced.
Bethany.
Yeah, Bethany.
The genre that built me.
There are no stories ever told that are on neutral ground.
Yeah.
Every story ever told, every narrative ever told, every book, is going to have some worldview put into it. The author's worldview is naturally going to heavily influence it.
Yeah, because
You
every
can't
human
avoid it.
has
You cannot avoid it.
Every human has a creed that they live by, and that creed reflects everything that they do.
Yep.
Even if they have no creed, that is their creed.
There's no neutral ground.
Yeah. A mode of expression, which is all art, will express what's going on in your brain specifically.
Surprise!
When you express it.
Yeah, because like I'll always, like I'm probably gonna regret letting my brain just take freedom on all this stuff further down the road, but no matter whatever I'm writing at the time is always going to reflect some kind of turmoil that's happening in my brain, and the characters then get to work through that turmoil with me, and we have a great party together. Yeah, it's like free therapy. That's why we're all writing books.
Would you like to get paid for therapy?
The image that you went through to get this book while trying to get free therapy?
It's free until I edit it, and then it costs money.
But if someone buys your book, then you're getting paid for therapy.
There we go. They're paying for my therapy. Huh?
Book 3.
What about it?
When is it?
I'm hoping for early 2024, but I can't make any promises because my current goal is to finish this draft and hand it off to beta readers at the end of the summer, and even that is a fingers crossed situation now. Writing has gone so badly this summer. Well, I've been too busy. I've been having fun, and that means I can't write.
Okay, I've been also too busy, but I haven't been having fun. I've been working on Pandora since May, and I've written approximately 8,000 words, which is kind of a...
Yay.
For summer writing? That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially since like right now you're kind of plotting and drafting at the same time, so
Yeah.
that's actually a lot of distance to cover.
I have most of the skeleton already kind of built out. It's just the Act 2 is a little bit more nebulous than the rest of it. And I'm also working 410s and a really gruesome job, so I get back and my one extra day a week is like, I have to write at least a scene today. Yes. And sometimes we achieve that.
Yeah.
But that's a scene a week, which is, 800 to 2,000 words.
You eat an elephant one bite at a time. You're working on it.
What?
That's why you put them in the fridge, Danielle.
What size fridge do you have? Right now.
Ashley?
I'm writing.
Yeah? Well, you are an English major. I guess I should have thought of that.
But outside of that, I've been kind of sort of off and on working on a novel for a couple of years. It really has just kind of like remained as like an idea in the back of my head for like a year.
The stews.
You know, I was gonna say, some people got a stew. I cannot write anything till I've thought about it for at least 3 years.
Yeah, I've been working on Pandora since 2020.
So it just kind of sat there for a little while, and then I started working on it, and then I realized that I could use it for one of my summer classes, which was research for creative writing.
We have 2 people at least sitting up here who have not talked about if they want to talk about about their writing yet. That's very inarticulate of me. But I don't know. There's 2 people. You would like to talk about what you write?
Yummy.
I wrote a lot more when I was like 15, 16, 17, and I haven't for several years, but I'm trying to get back into it. More of kind of fantasy, but also I really love mythologies and retellings and history. So
Fun.
All the good things.
yeah, and hopefully soon I might start working on that, but I need to get a hold on my jobs first.
While I sit foaming at the mouth in the corner waiting for you to offer me a scrap of something.
I have, okay? You've read what I have.
Joel, do you want to talk about your writing?
The man has words.
I think he is in the middle of something.
Do you have
Another male author?
One of us.
Define author.
Scribbler?
Somebody
Fine
writes
author.
stories.
Yeah.
Define stories.
What about your screenplay?
That's what we're asking you to do.
Do you do the thing, Joel, where you put
Words
ideas
on
into
a
letters
paper?
and sentences and paragraphs and stories?
I don't even do that.
Sometimes that's very
Bethany.
Well, I've been doing animation for 10 years,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
so I have to write something for
You
them.
do! That's really cool.
And some of them are phenomenal. Just to be clear, I could send you some high quality cinematography.
He has his own choose your own ending series.
Like, not just, you get to the end of the video, pick the end of the story. No. This is extensive. You could lose a couple hours on it. Look, I
Maybe
explored
30
like
minutes, but
2 or 3 pathways, and it was like eating up my time, and I was like, I could lose a significant portion of my day on this.
My videos are not very long, so it's mostly just me having an idea and then sitting down and just spewing it all out. I can't start filming immediately because I always have to give it a bit to just like sit there and me not think about it, and then I go back and I read it and I'm like,
It's a shame that face wasn't on the video recording.
Stephen King actually talks about this. He talks about how between drafts you need to let it sit for a while so you can come back to it and be like, does it actually work? Without having the freshness of it in your mind. Like, it's not attached to you specifically anymore. It's kind of a thing that's been done and you can look at it with more detachment.
What is the best piece of writing advice you guys have ever received?
Single piece of writing advice.
Yep,
Right.
single piece of writing advice.
I got a load.
Have your stories have purpose. Have it have some type of thing that you want to tell your audience.
I would say without purpose, it's not even a story. It's just the things that happen. It's just the plot. There's nothing to it.
Without themes, without purpose, without some reason to tell the story, you're just writing out multiple events that are stringed together. There's no actual glue that's holding it properly together.
It's less of a piece of advice and more of like a guiding principle, but this is a quote from Arnold Bennett I found in John York's Into the Woods. The quote is, "The essential characteristic of a really great novelist, a Christ-like, all-encompassing compassion." And it's something I've found in my favorite authors is you have to care about the people you're writing about. They can't just be puppets to serve the story. The story, they are the story. And working with them and kind of finding out where they're going is the point. The people who rejoice with those who rejoice, and the people who enter into other people's lives with that kind of sharing in are the ones that really resonate. And if you can work with your characters to the point where you're entering into their rejoicing and their weeping, they resonate more with an audience.
Well, it's like one of the most common rules of writing is that if you don't care about a scene, no one else is going to either.
Yeah.
So if you don't care about a character, no one else is going to either. And you can tell when an author didn't care about a character. They were like, oh, we need this dude to do this thing, so he's here. And you're like, why? One of my favorite things about this book, this is just a side bit of trivia that was very funny to me. My closest to a comic relief character I have in this book, because there are only 5 characters, so nobody could be a comic relief character because not enough. I had several people tell me they thought he was going to be the villain when he showed up because they were like, he's too nice, he's
know
a villain.
exactly
And
what
I was like, no.
This is the one Beauty and the Beast retelling I read, and like the Gaston character showed up, and then like he wasn't bad, like.
And you were like,
He wasn't
What?
Gaston.
It was like she like took care of her father and her sister while she was with the Beast, and I was like, I
and
thought he was
she
gonna
chose
have.
the Beast over him.
I don't remember. I guess, but I don't remember why she didn't like him. But
It might have been the kind of nice guy schmuck nonsense.
I don't know, because like he never did anything bad, and I was just very surprised. So I was like,
Did he
when's
wear
he
a
gonna go?
fedora?
When's he gonna be evil?
wear a
And then he
fedora.
never did anything.
You don't trust people who wear fedoras.
The fedora and the katana.
It's a fantasy story. They didn't have fedoras.
They could. It's fantasy.
They
have a
don't.
fedora.
They didn't
It's
have
like, yeah,
fedoras.
it's obviously a fedora, but it's called something else.
It's called like very minutely describe the fedora so people can
Yes.
figure out that it is a fedora
It's
and then be
fedora,
confused why he
but-
described it that much.
Why?
I can't tell you how many times in the Serif cities I want to say the words French doors, but you know what? They don't have the French.
Just call them double doors.
That's what I
But
told
they're
her.
windows.
But they're not doors. French doors are windows
That happened to be.
that happen to be door shaped
Our actual
and
doors,
openable.
too.
Oh, but like the writing advice thing. Can I do two things?
Yes.
Because I have one that's practical and one that's emotional.
No, you can only do one.
So,
the only one.
so we're gonna overrule Elijah.
Copy that.
No, but practically, like you said, on writing shaped you as a writer. Like the very first writing advice book I ever read was Gail Carson Levine's Writing Magic. I tore that paperback to bits because I carried it with me everywhere, and I still have that torn up copy, by the way.
There it goes.
But like at the end of like every single chapter, she says, "Save what you wrote, save what you wrote," and she like emphasizes that you need to save everything you write for like a minimum of like 12 years. And I kid you not, when I didn't take that all that seriously at the beginning, and I threw away like one thing. I regret that deeply now, and I have been writing for 12 years.
Funny story.
Regrets.
When I was like 17, I had this random like 6-month period where I decided that you couldn't write. Some of you have heard this before. You couldn't write to glorify God. So I deleted everything I had ever written in the past 5 years.
Oh.
No.
And then like a year later, I was like, well, that was dumb.
Yeah, that hurts me. Like I'm hurt now. That is very sad.
Most of it was genuinely terrible. I just think it'd
but
be
you
funny
shouldn't-
to
you
be able
shouldn't
to
say
see the
that,
growth.
Even the terrible
Yeah.
writing
Especially the
has
terrible.
like potential. Everything you've written has a spark of something somewhere that could be worth something.
It does.
And I think later on, as you mature as an author and you just get better, your skills improve, you can go back to your earlier stuff that you thought was terrible and pretty much redeem it.
I'm still rifling through the pockets of my old bad world building. That's like there's a corpse in a corner somewhere. It's like there's something worthwhile in here somewhere.
Yeah.
For sure.
I recycle characters from stuff that doesn't work
recycle
out. I'm like, you're a
good
get in,
character.
losers. We're going to another story. Yeah.
I remember I was working on something recently. I was like, that actually fits in with that narrative over there that I threw away years ago, but threw away because it wasn't
Good.
worth anything. I could borrow that. We're gonna evacuate you all from the story and just
Yes.
gonna put you in a different one.
Yes.
It's really cool to see, looking back at old writing, because I have like my earliest writing, just not that middle 5 years there, and see how God used some of the things that you were thinking about and writing about in that time period that you didn't recognize, in the way that He took those and used them to grow you and to make you into the person you are today, or to affect like choices you've made in other things. And it's really cool seeing how He uses like the little tiny bits and pieces, because He does.
He really does.
You can track that in storytelling in a really easy way, because so much of it, especially in your teenage years, is stuff that you're like critically thinking about at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's also fun to look back at the characters you were writing at that time and realizing the way you were writing your characters kind of reflects what was wrong with you at the time.
No, I was just thinking they always reflect what story I was obsessed with at the time. Like, I'll just be like, well, if it isn't Bucky Barnes in a different mask.
I recognize you.
Same word, different font.
Usually italic, I don't know.
Just
a little bit. Just a little bit sideways.
But what
Yeah.
if it sideways?
But the other thing is, like, this might just be a me thing, like my craving for originality. I had to look it up because I can never remember who this is, but it's a Charles Lint quote. Nobody sees the world the same way that you do, so nobody has the same stories that you have to tell. Like, there is nothing new under the sun, but I have a personal anecdote here, okay? A really long time ago, she and I were trying to co-write a novel. It didn't go super well. We didn't fully know how to co-write a novel, so there were some scenes that we would be like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the scene. We're each going to write our own version of the scene, and then we're going to combine them in the best way possible. Don't do that. Especially because we'd have the exact same outline for the scene. We'd be like, all right, this happens, this happens, this happens. Write it. And then we'd have these vastly different takes on it of the exact same outline of the same scene with the same pre-established characters. And I was like, he was right. Charles Link was right. So, yeah, like, if you worry about originality, stop that.
I actually was thinking about it, and I thought I had one, but I do actually have two. And one of them relates to character building, and one of them relates to just story finishing. You can't edit and write at the same time. And this is the biggest trap that I've fallen into when I was first trying to write, and I've seen, like, everybody else I know who's ever written anything, like, it doesn't matter how, like, long they wrote or anything, is the idea of trying to write and edit at the same time, where you're like, oh, I can just go fix this one thing right now. And the answer is no, because if you do that, it's like a spiraling circle into, I can't finish this story, I hate everything, and I never want to touch this book ever again.
I was talking to Tim over breakfast. He was like asking me how writing was going, and he was like, do you edit? You say go? And I'm like, my brother, that is a mistake. If you ever try it, don't do that.
So, second piece of writing advice is simply one I actually picked up from theater, and it's the idea that nobody is ever in a room without a purpose. Yeah. They have a goal. Yeah. And so if you're stuck in a scene and you can't figure out why your character's dialogue isn't working and why they're not making any sense or why somebody feels flat, go back to what that character's motivation is, because everybody in a room at any given point in time has a motivation. And that's been incredibly helpful in pretty much every scene I've ever written, because you can go back to any scene and fix anything by being like, oh, this one dude right here, what is his motivation?
What does he want?
Full strings.
I was reading a really funny piece of commentary from Buffy the Vampire Slayer the other day. This guy was talking about his character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He says, sometimes he would be in a scene, he had no idea why he was there. Like, he's portraying this character, and the script does not say why he's there.
Legolas and the entire...
Apparently, he said that he just made up motivations, and he said that basically 90% of the time, he was in a scene without knowing why. He was there to kill another character, and he had to change his mind and forgot.
That's hilarious.
I wasn't actually throwing Legolas into the bus. Orlando Bloom said that most of the time in the filming he didn't know why he was there as a character, so...
They didn't tell me what he was doing
what he was doing.
Faces in the background.
Just there.
Which, to be true, good actors are supposed to figure out why their character's there without the director telling them. So that's a little on him.
So I have two as well.
I started
But I don't think I can trace them back to a specific quote or anything really. The first one is, whatever you're doing, you come up with a line, a story idea, a scene, just write it right then and there. Do not wait for like the perfect words or, oh, I'll wait till I have time. It's more often than not, once I write down one line, I also write down 5 more, or an entire scene, or pages before I realize what's going on. So it really is just like getting over the hump between not writing and actually writing.
Write that blighter down.
I was going to say, Danielle's taking your advice.
Write it down.
But then the second one is years ago. I think I was in my teens, and someone mentioned like, oh yes, well, I was reading all of these books about writing, and like to the point where I wasn't actually writing, I was just reading books about writing. And I was like, huh. I have never really thought about reading a book about writing. After I got into research, most profitable thing that I have learned is story structure. And that works for me. That is not across the board something that like everybody has to go deep dive into. But learning just the general, like there's a lot of different ways that you can structure a story, but in general, all stories have the same arc and they have the same scenes. They have the dark moment, they have the midpoint, they have reaction to action, like, and once you learn to recognize all of those, you then, when you are looking at other stories, you're saying like, oh, wait a second, that's what that moment is, and that's what that moment is. And even for like scriptural stories, it's really interesting to like have this lens now to look at and just see the way that God has actually set up this entire world where story makes sense.
I was in a conversation with Bo about this. He's a friend of ours.
No, what?
He was talking about how reading Robert McKee's book on story made him a post-millennialist.
Yes.
Because he was looking at this book on story structure and realizing that the elements there were directly reflected in Scripture. Like, Scripture was the original story framework that kind of all of humanity has just been accidentally bouncing off of for the last several thousand years.
Can you expand on that? Because I want to know how.
So, Scripture is a story. It's God's story of his people throughout history up until a certain point. And it kind of follows these similar arcs. Kind of all, I haven't studied as much as I could have, but it has its own arcs, its own paradise lost, conflict, growth, savior, moment of deep, dark pain for that guy.
Glory.
Victory, glory. And that is a narrative that we have all across human literature for the last 7,000 years. We have things are good. Things are suddenly really bad, usually because of a choice a person has made to do something very wrong. We have conflict and the search for the way to resolve this. We have a point of revelation, realize this is the solution to our problem. There's the effort to get it, and usually there's a deep, dark point of failure or suffering in that. And then there is resolution and glory. And I'm a little bit out of order because I am talking through my nose. But you have this cohesive arc, and I like to look at it kind of in the lens of Freytag's pyramid, which is just a diagram that kind of reflects it.
I was watching you draw that. I was like, I know what that is. It looks kind of like the square root symbol, honestly.
There are so, like, go back to what you're saying, there are guiding principles of story that go back to the original story that are really helpful to understand, kind of create cohesion.
Going back to what you said, using the guidelines that are already there can make your story that much more potent, because people aren't distracted by you trying to do something new and weird and being like, what on earth are they doing and why are they doing it? And also, again, that storyline structure is part of this world.
Yeah.
Because it is ingrained literally into history.
It's fundamental.
It is fundamental.
God is the greatest story writer that
author.
ever is.
The author.
So if we want to know how to write stories, we should go to him.
Look at him.
Good
Look how
Lord,
he wrote
do you
stories.
Tell stories? How can we do it too? That's one of the fun things about being an author in the faith is that we follow the author and he knows what he's doing the most.
We also have a reason for understanding why our characters are right or wrong or kind or cruel.
Amen.
And moral structure.
Compass.
Our moral compass is really well, it hopefully can be really well calibrated.
It has a very strong north.
Gray morality is a myth.
Amen.
How about everyone's favorite tropes?
I have a list. We'll be
Let's
here all
just
day.
acknowledge that found family is on everybody's list and then set that one aside before we all start listing them.
Children of adoption is just
Look what you did.
children of adoption found family is just the top of the list.
Well, once again, being children of adoption, look at the freaking Bible. Why do we like it?
Exactly.
So in actual books, I, as a reader, actually don't like found family as much as I like redeemed family.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes.
That's a good one too.
You know, you have a good point.
Because
I'm sorry.
Tropes and stories of reconciliation, redemption. I love redeeming bad guys. That goes back to us. We are redeemed in
It's part of your heart
Christ.
story.
Yeah.
Like the actual, like,
The entire theme of Scripture is redemption itself.
Like on the complete opposite end of the scale.
You're like fallen heroes.
I don't think. How unfortunate. That also, but as a secondary to what I'm about to say, I love a villain to just be absolutely off their rocker, insane. And the thing is, I've written so many like redeemable villains.
Sometimes bad just has to be bad because I mean we have
and then I
God
wanna
who is
kill him
so
morally.
good, and you know we have
there's actual evil.
There needs to be things that are legitimately evil that we're fighting against.
And out of context verse from, I think it's James, where it says, like, we have all these, like, redeemable villains who's like, oh, they actually are good, they actually have the spark of good in them. And it's like, okay, in Scripture, we do have demons who know what the truth is
and tremble.
And the vast majority of my villains I don't redeem because there needs to be some type of justice.
And besides, then the guillotine isn't going to get any use.
It's not. I think it's the difference between a villain and an antagonist, or like a rival character. Like the reason that Zuko worked as a character in Avatar: The Last Airbender is because he wasn't a villain; he was an antagonist. But then you held him up to actual villainous characters like Ozai and Zhao, who were actually actively malicious and greedy. And you look at this angry little 16-year-old boy, he's like, oh. He's not evil as much as he's 16.
Any of y'all ever seen
Shots fired.
Danielle's up.
Bethany hasn't gone.
No, I did.
She did.
I was talking about the off the wall is crazy.
Okay. I am not a huge trope person, period. So I have the one I already mentioned. And then one that's more of a trope as a reader than as a writer, more because I'm irritated. There's the big thing right now where everybody's talking about how much they dislike what's-his-face from Jane Eyre. And how, like, the
Rochester?
big... Yes, and the big trope with, the bad dude who's secretly a softie on the inside, and he's not really that bad, and you're like, you read the book, and you're like, this dude is a despicable human being. But she's like, oh no, but he's really okay, and he changed. And you're like, this change has lasted approximately 2 weeks, and it's because he's infatuated with you. Like, he's literally obsessed with you and literally stalking you everywhere you go. So one of the reasons that I love one of the reasons I love Mr. Rochester, I do love his character, is because him and Darcy both, they change when they think they're not going to get the girl, and it lasts a long time before they do get the girl. It is part of their actual redemption arc. They make the change because it's the right thing to do, and then they keep the change, and it lasts. They get the blessing of also being like, oh, and I get this person that I've loved all this time, and that's really cool. Yeah. And I love that trope. And it's basically never ever well done.
Work on him for seasons. I'm sorry, I thought it was my hair. I'm just over here yanking Danielle's hair while I'm talking.
Are so good, right?
Passing the torch.
Yeah. As a reader, I really enjoy when they actually deal with the trauma and the issues of the characters, because I've read so many things where they're just oh yeah, that really bad thing happened to this character, but we're just gonna totally ignore it. But they don't ever deal with it.
They make it relevant to one scene.
Yes, and
it's plot relevant and not character relevant, which is so
hate
annoying.
that so much. I think the enemies to lovers trope is really overdone at this point, but my favorite, the Queen's Thief series, does it so well.
Oh my god.
I recommend.
Don't do it because you showed the gesticulating.
That's the sort of thing I love, because they were genuinely enemies, where opposing kingdoms at war, and they loved each other so much by the end of the series. So much. I love it so much.
I'm
Night to day.
Say something that's going to make everybody really mad.
Okay.
I'm so
I actually detest the enemies to lovers plotline in The King's Thief. Queen's Thief. I can't stand it because she's a terrible person. She literally cuts off his hand on purpose to torture this kid. And then he's like, oh, I love you. And I'm like, no, you don't love her.
Okay, yes, but also he's loved her for a very long time. And
why? He's a backstory. No, but he's not.
Okay, they talk about it in the series about how she cut off his hand because she was scared for her kingdom.
No, she didn't. In the story, she literally says, she's like, I could let him go and I could get a power pole this way that will be equally as effective. But instead, I'm going to cut off his hand because I want to send a stronger message.
But she wanted to send a stronger message. This is. I have mixed feelings about the plotline, but if she's trying to defend her kingdom, which is her first and foremost priority in her mind, she's going to want to do whatever it is that sends the strongest impact, especially because she's such a ruthless ruler.
She's ruthless because her court is so unruly, and they're
terrible.
Yes.
I believe that she writes their love story better later on. I only made it through the second book because when I finished the second book, I was so mad that I was like,
keep going. There are better books to come.
The King of Atolia is the best one. It is if I want to get back into reading it,
You're going to read that one?
Time
okay, I will read it for you. I will read it for you. You can finish your tropes now. I'm sorry.
Oh god.
That's one thing.
Tragic villains, ones that could have been so good and yet they just kept choosing the wrong path, and so you really want them to do the right thing, and then in the end
they never make the right choice, and you were rooting for them so hard.
Actually, not quite. They often will make the right choice, but at the end of the day, their idol is their downfall.
Story structure-wise, it always will be.
Yes.
So what they need is usually counterintuitive to what they want, because their want is selfish. Their want is also buried in usually their trauma, hurt, past experiences, XYZ, whatever, what have you. Their want is always going to destroy them, and their need will always fulfill them. Mm-hmm. So you have characters. Help me. Who's the guy from The Outsiders?
Pony Boy.
Ooh. No.
Which person?
The antagonist kid.
No.
There's no antagonist.
No, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember what the kid's name is. I'm sorry.
What?
But whoever the kid is,
I think you're thinking of Dallas.
the kid who gets hunted down and shot at the end.
Dallas.
It's because he could not change.
Yep. Because he would not change.
Yes, exactly. And it's so juicy. I watched him die on screen and I was like, did. I watched him die. I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
That's a great way to describe that.
You're enjoying it. I would have just been crying my eyes out.
I wasn't laughing. I was like, wow. I watch bad things happen to characters, and I'm like, fascinating. Tell me more. Yeah, I was watching Sing with Naomi, which is an amazing movie, by the way. And I was describing plot structure to her at the same time. We had to pause the movie so I could have like a 10-minute rant. And while she was taking notes, just like enabling my rant, I was like describing the low point. You were describing the dark night of the soul. I was like, and it's broken him, and it's amazing. She was like, did you just say it's amazing? I was like, yes.
Yes.
My superhero story, you know, like they don't tell their family who they are, but mine does, because he got his powers when he was like 7 years old. So, you know, a child can't hide. I can squeeze through this tiny crack in the door.
Every 7-year-old is gonna be like, hey mom, look what my head does.
So his parents know, and he told them that, you know, he wanted to be a superhero and he wanted to help people. It's also kind of tackles some themes of like letting your child grow up, because there's like it's a moment like when Zach is about to go face the bad guy and his dad talks to him and just like, I'm very proud of you, son, because you are the son I was trying to raise.
Well, I would say one reason that a lot of authors avoid writing healthy relationships is not just because drama is cheaper and easier to write. It's also probably because this is the only experience they have.
Broken world and all that.
With the romantic relationship specifically, like I think a lot of the reasons why the leads are magically broken up in season 2 is because in the secular world, people aren't really, they're not dating to last. They're not expecting to marry someone. They're just looking for whoever's going to give them like a fun experience this second. So they're not expecting those characters to have a long-lasting relationship either.
And breakup culture is idolized.
Yes.
Yeah, but like I was watching a YouTube video the other day of a YouTuber I follow who's about my age, and she's talking about relationships, and she's like, I expected I'd be in several serious relationships by now, and I'm like, several? We're serious? You're only 25. You would expect
all at once?
He's like, and it's like serious ones too, like not like I'm like, this is such a sad world to live in. You're not looking for the one, you're just looking for, I don't know, something.
Their own season of their own show.
Okay, so there's a bit in The King of Atolia where Costas sees Eugenides for the first time.
Yes.
Like, sees Eugenides for the first time. And he's like, this little shrimp
This is crazy.
knucklehead of a man is a king. That moment of your perception of them being used against you, and like there's this entire other side of this character that you didn't expect, but it has so much more potency. I revel in those.
The friendship between those two characters is top tier, okay? Top tier. Like, Costas turns around, he's like, where's my king? His king is like running rampant in a candy shop right now. He doesn't know.
But that particular element kind of leans into my favorite things in stories, which is irony, contrast, and wait a minute, what?
Irony, contrast, wait a minute, what?
Also, Toph Beifong, like that is a 12-year-old blind girl who I could put in my pocket. She's the greatest master of her martial art in the world of all time. Just in general, the Toph character, the Eugenides character, the character who is way more than they seem, and what looks like a weakness on them is actually a really fundamental strength. Again, they're just
Little secret savages.
The thing Megan Mullen Turner does really well with The King of Atolia and with Thick as Thieves is the main character he's not the one doing things are happening to him, he's just experiencing these things as he goes along, is just kind of observing and has no clue what's going on.
I love side characters, the main character books.
So
outsider perspective is just like I'll say it, a very juicy trope.
So good.
It's got so much to offer.
I tried to write that for Sparrow, the one I'm releasing next year, but it didn't end up being that way. She is, but she isn't. We failed. 5 years did something to it.
Mysterious ways.
I know.
It's like working on a story forever, things change or something.
Amen.
Every time.
Surprise!
Because the longer you work on something, the further you're moving away from the person you were at previous points you were writing on it, which is part of why I don't work on mine for like a super long time, because otherwise I'm just going to end up writing a vastly different story. That works very well for some people, but for me it just causes an enormous amount of frustration because I'm not in the place where I was telling that story then, which is resulting in me working on my backup project right now and just wanting to like shake a little me and be like, please Better.
Please better.
Joel?
Trope torch.
So let's see.
I don't think I've ever experienced enemies to lovers where I've liked it at all.
That's not a trope you like.
You do a lot of
Yeah.
people who are
I know,
insane
we
and
are
don't
now
realize it.
friends.
You've done a lot of shorts with that.
You have so
This
much
is sneaking up
depth
on
in
him.
your little.
It is. I love to describe other people's writing styles to them because they're just dumbfounded.
Well, on the same note, I do enjoy a story where someone goes through like an unbelievable amount of physical and psychological pain.
Bro, same.
Where it doesn't drive them insane by the end, but their mind is also like
Altered.
Change.
Big Frodo moment.
yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's delicious in the moment, but
How's the
then
feeling?
identifying like
I love that.
how
How's the feeling?
badly they're wrecked after that is a little bit hurtful to me. Like, especially in Frodo's case, he's like, I can't live in Middle Earth anymore. Ta-ta. So,
That's why Misery is my favorite Stephen King book.
Yeah,
Of course it is.
That makes sense.
I was about to say, can you identify who the horror writers are in the room? Because Joel's like, psychological stress, and all of us were like, yeah.
I think Sing was a great way of teaching people plot structure because it's such a generic movie.
It is, amen.
I would say that Sing's big unique thing though is that they have so many characters who are not quite main characters, but characters who are so
an
very
ensemble
important.
cast.
And they managed to give every single one of them an important emotional climax without all of that emotional excitement becoming exhausting. Right. And that's very admirable.
Which is why they had to not give the mouse a redemption story, because if the mouse had had a
No,
redemption
because
story
Mike-
on top of everybody else, it would have been too much emotion all at the same time. You would have been like, whoa,
I don't think there was room
stop
for it
emoting at
anyway.
me.
Yeah.
Do you know canonically, the director of the sequel confirmed that the mouse was eaten by the bears?
Yes!
I'm glad.
I like this. I like Sing, but I kind of feel like no one acknowledges that Buster Moon is like the villain. Like he does nothing really good. He consistently lies, does bad things, steals.
He's
He
in
is
the
an actual
whirlpool.
menace.
He's in the whirlpool.
He's like
he made
a
a bad
public
choice.
safety menace. What about kids movie? The wolf is like the not exactly misunderstood, but like we could have like that whole like
It's still a biblically archetypical trope. Like, it's a biblical archetype. The wolf is the bad guy.
That's in the Bible, right?
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
the wolf,
sheep.
The wolf's coming.
wolves
There we go.
come over
I
the
was
wall
trying
or
to remember the
whatever.
verse, but I couldn't come up with it.
Or thieves come over the walls.
Thieves come over. Thieves come over the wall, but there's like the wolves and the sheep.
It's like they're in there somewhere too.
What's
Yes.
it? Jacob.
Your sheep among
Jacob's
wolves,
blessing to
right?
his son was Benjamin is a ravening wolf. I don't remember the context of that, so I'm looking it up.
A couple of Jacob's blessings to his sons are really dark.
They are. You're like looking at them, they're like, you are terrible or something.
This is my advice to you, my son. You suck.
Immediately, Reuben, you're great. Unstable as water, you shall not succeed.
Wow, thanks, Dad.
Simeon and Levi,
has a
instrument of
couple.
cruelty, are in their dwelling place. Heck,
This is like, alright,
man.
kids,
You rock.
you all suck. You're terrible children. You're all gonna fail in life. And now I'm gonna go.
Except for you.
Zebulun didn't have
Well,
anything
imagine
too bad.
being the
No, a
parents
couple of them
in Ruth, where they named their kids. What was
Puny
and Weakling
Puny
or
and Weakling?
something?
There we go. I was
Yeah.
trying to remember the translations.
Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's neutral is the wrong term, but there's not a moral connotation attached to it.
There's a little bit.
Devouring usually
Ravenous.
has a bad
For
connotation.
the sheep and the wolves, there's a little bit.
Ravenous wolf is a bit punchy, but nothing about the actions pertaining to the wolf sound like Jacob is endorsing or condemning them. You're just saying you are a hungry wolf.
But there is the sheep among wolves passage, though,
Yeah,
right?
but that's different.
She's talking about just
I'm
this
just-
specifically.
Yeah, because usually
They're
like
greedy.
visual motifs in the Bible they generally mean the same thing across the board. Not always, but generally.
Some variation.
Yeah, there's some conflicting narrative about snakes. The snake in Judges was a healing symbol. The snake in Genesis was kind of, well,
The devil.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting hungry.
it is hunger time. Eli just said,
It's
looking up
hunger
by
time.
11, it is
Yeah.
noon.
Nice
Yeah.
and deceit.
We have been recording for an hour and 40 minutes. So
That was pretty
Nice.
rich.
yeah.
That was rich.
That was a great time.
This was really good.